Jim Rohn said, success is what you attract by the person you become. How do you become? You become by designing the exact person you want to be and becoming that person right now. You see, I find that most people believe that success is by accident or by luck. I believe that success is by design. Hi, I'm Alfonso Cuadra, entrepreneur, author, speaker, and creator and host of this program. You see, I went from being a 15-year-old, war-torn, homeless high school dropout to running a successful corporation before the age of 20. But what happened? Did the world change? Did people change? No. I discovered that for things to change in my life, I had to change. And I did. I sat down at 17 years old and I wrote a list of goals and designed the exact life I wanted to live. I achieved everything on that list before 20 years old. Success is not by accident. It is by design. And welcome to the Success by Design show, where we bring you the stories and formulas of successful people that have designed their own success. And today is a very special program because we're talking about selling yourself to success and also some selling tips. Now, there's an expert that I know that knows how to turn selling into buying.
You got it.
Trevor,
Very
thank
nice
you for coming on the program. Trevor Wilkins. And you are the author of this book.
30 years of sweat went into that, yes.
30 years. Well, yes. So we can probably see it's heavy.
Yes, that's right.
So how did you get into this? I mean, you're a sales expert and you teach people how to sell. So how did you get into this business?
Well, when I left the army, which was less about selling and more about telling, I went to the stock exchange, and there we were selling stocks and shares, and I spent the next 25, 27 years selling stuff to people. And I worked my arse off. I worked so hard. It was not good for my health. It wasn't good for my family. And what was worse, I saw a lot of my kids, but there was nothing left. And all of that time, I made a lot of money, and I worked pretty well at it. But I spotted some people who were around me, some people who worked for me, some people worked with me, and some of the people I worked for, they were disgustingly healthy, disgustingly relaxed, but actually making just as much and often more money than me. And I thought, there's some kind of magic juice here. And I thought, I want some of that.
You want some of that juice?
Yeah, well, and I want some of the juice back, you know, because it's hard. And I think salespeople are the worst people on earth for selling themselves in terms of the pizzazz they show. They always say, oh, selling's a bit special, you know, you've got to be like me and Alfonso, you know, you've got to be full of yourself, you've got to be full of self-confidence. It's not true. And I sat down, I'm an engineer by background, and I thought there must be a process here. And I modelled the best of the best. And it took me about 3 or 4 years, at the same time as I was being a sales director. I was getting around the world, and I modelled the way that people did it, and I discovered that actually it is extremely simple. And that's really all I've done, is I've created a process, and the process does some very good things to the way people feel, which is actually the most exciting part. But that's really how I got into it. It was a desire to have a better life for me, for my girls, and for my friends.
Now, I think we're always selling. I mean, selling is important. We're either selling an idea or selling something to our spouse. We're always trying to sell something, right? Is it important for someone to know just the basics of sales?
Well, you see, when we run our courses, we have certain words that are banned, like closing and various things like that, old classic sales words. And one of the words I ban is selling, because it's all about creating a buyer. If I'm influencing my wife to go on holiday to Halifax, I've got to see the problem from her point of view. I've got a very good reason for going to Halifax. I'm really keen to go, but you've got to put that behind you. And that's what kids should be taught this in school. If you're influencing somebody to buy an idea or to buy you as a service, to mow the lawn or something like that, you've got to see the whole process from the buyer's point of view. And that's the fundamental foundation to everything we do. Once you're able to do that, and it's not simple, because most people, particularly if you've got a quarterly target, you know, your mortgage is going to blow you away or your marriage is going to go down the tube if you don't make your target. That's a pressure, and I felt that. I don't know whether you have, but it's a killer. But if you've got those sort of pressures, you tend to think about yourself. I've got to make the target. And moving across the other side of the table is probably the most important thing that people can do.
So, because the theme of the show today is selling ourselves. But not only that, selling ourselves to success. Now, from your point of view, is this possible? And is it possible for everybody?
Well, I say, and the book says it quite frequently, there is really no difference in influencing people to buy, and that's the new phrase, influencing people to buy. So
not convincing.
We don't say selling, we don't do convincing. We could talk about that for a long time, but we haven't got time. But I want, when people move away from our classes, they are knowing how to influence people to buy. But here's the thing, influencing people to buy an idea, a product, my pen, a service, me mowing your lawn, the idea that you become my distributor. And not only do you become my distributor, but I can use your warehouses to store my stuff in. The idea you employ me. I teach a lot of students and young entrepreneurs and people who've said, okay, I've given up being an entrepreneur, I want to get a real job. Selling yourself is the other thing. And in each case, you're influencing somebody to buy. And there's some very fundamental rules which we can talk about. But that's what it comes down to.
I really want to get into that, but also I wanted to point out, like, you'll be selling yourself to your spouse, your potential future spouse.
Absolutely.
And that's a whole other...
That's a tough one. Well, there's a friend of mine, he does actually specialize in using the same techniques that I have.
So you have some techniques that are very, that I can learn from?
Yeah, I think the key thing is they're not hints and tips. Hints and tips, you can go and buy 100 sales books, go and look at 100 videos. You've got to fundamentally look at two things. The first one's confidence. Until somebody has the confidence, then they're not going to be rejected, they're not going to look idiots, and they're not going to be seen to be too aggressive. Nobody's even going to start. People like you and me, we're bad at that because people think, I could never be like Alfonso. He's so full of pizzazz. But actually, we're our own worst enemies. One of the best salespeople I ever had, she was a really boring geologist.
Wow.
Really boring geologist. She was selling very high-tech software because she sat down, she worked out what would make people buy it. She worked out what people would take away from buying that software. And she was just a really nice person. No aggression, no pizzazz, none of that salesy stuff. She was brilliant. She made
just logical.
Just logical, and she was interested. And that's kind of one of the key things. If anybody wants to take a hit and tip away, you've got to become or be truly interested in the person on the other side. I'll give you an example. We were selling a big complicated banking system to some Dutch guys. And I was shuttling backwards and forwards between London and Rotterdam. And I was focused so on the software that we were selling. We were installing it and testing it. I completely forgot. We all learn most from our mistakes. I completely forgot to think about what the buyer, the actual treasurer of this organisation. And one day we were sitting having a beer and he started explaining to me what was important to him. I thought, this could be a subtle hint on his part. And I suddenly realised that that's the point at which you really have to start from. What is in it for them? And we got the deal 2-3 days later after I had this sudden resounding change in realising what was going on. So that's an important dynamic.
That's incredible. Now you have something here for me. You brought an experiment, or you're going to put me through some training?
I'm going to connect your brain up and we'll reprogram your brain. There's quite a lot of brain reprogramming goes on. No, it's just a little bit of fun. We have a lot of fun on all our trainings because it's very easy to stand in front of a PowerPoint and tell people. Right from the very first moment, I get people jumping around, doing stuff, and not stupid stuff like waving their hands in the air. It's all to do with finding out how you get people to buy for you. So let me ask you a question. Do you drive a car?
Yes.
What sort of a car do you drive?
Right, Mercedes ML.
Mercedes ML, which one? 350?
The 350.
So what made you buy that rather than any other car?
Well, growing up, I always thought that would be a successful kind of car.
Okay, so for you, it was the way it looked. So you could drive around in a Mercedes and you could feel good.
It would make me feel good, yeah.
So it sounds like a pretty strong buying driver, and that's one of the things we talk about, a buying driver. We don't talk about sales, we talk about buying driver. So a buying driver for you was status and how good you felt. And that's perfectly legitimate because I feel the same way. Was there any other reason?
And plus, it doesn't break down.
It doesn't break down.
It's German.
So what happens when things break down?
You got to put money out of your pocket to fix them.
So you want to save some money. So you had to put some money up front to save some money later on. Any other reason for buying an ML350? Do you drive fast, Alfonso? You look like a fast driver.
I'm not a fast driver.
Well, I'm a fast driver. And I must admit, and I've had a few cars in my time, never crashed any, but a big driver for me is how good I feel in driving the car itself. So it's the same idea of state, that's what we call it, that I feel good, but for you, it's to do with how good I feel in this because I feel successful. For me, it's just a sheer physical pleasure of driving it. What else you bought recently? You look like a man who buys stuff.
I buy real estate.
Real estate? Mm-hmm. Okay, so for what purpose do you buy real estate?
For retirement.
Ah, right, okay. And is it cheaper to buy real estate now for retirement than later on?
Absolutely.
So you're saving money there, aren't you? That's pretty cool. Are you going to make some income maybe if you decide not to use that real estate for retirement? Would you sell it and make a profit?
Absolutely.
Cool. That sounds pretty good. Anything else you bought? Have you bought anything recently that saved you a bit of time?
I did buy time management course.
Oh right, good lord! Did it work? They
What's
don't
that?
always.
Every little bit counts, right?
Well, I mean, one of the things I find most common is entrepreneurs like yourself and me. We spend a lot of time doing admin. There's a lot of people out there who sell outsourced admin, and quite often they'll try and sell it to me how cheap they are, how good they are. But the person that I actually use for my admin, she focused on one thing, which was how much time am I going to release to go and write books and talk to people and stuff. So, in fact, without knowing it, you've quietly generated the only 5 reasons that anybody, and I mean anybody, would buy anything. An idea, a service, a product, this idea of being my channel. And luckily, it produces the word tyres, spelt in the North American way, without the Y. So, T, time saved, things will happen more regularly. Maybe things will be delayed. As a result of investing in this particular bond, the yield from the bond will come 3 years later, but it'll be higher. So we can actually combine things together. We can combine T and I, time and income. Maybe an SI. S is state. SI might be a situation that I'm a bit of a jacketaholic. I love buying expensive jackets. And when I wear my jackets, I feel good. And I perform better and generally make some more money. Mm-hmm. So TIRES, and R, what would you think that might stand for? Any idea? It's a bit
Running
tougher.
away.
Running away, very close. Risk, pretty
Risk.
close. Yeah, and of course you might combine that RE. So when you bought your car, you know if you have an accident in a Mercedes, the result of a crash would be much less. Now tyres are very fundamental because if somebody's selling technology or they're selling themselves, they've got to go through the whole process of saying, what would somebody take away from employing me? Would they be able to get a salesperson who produces results more quickly? They'd be buying T. Would they be getting a salesperson that they'd have to invest less money in? They're less worried about time. So, in fact, in everything in life, there is a tyres test. And if you can actually, before you go in to talk to somebody, to influence them to buy you, to buy your ideas, or to buy whatever it is you'd like them to buy, and you know what their 5 buying drivers might be, then you just do what my old boss Willie Ross said, just have a good old discussion and see how you can help them. And you discuss their business and become genuinely interested, and you will find almost automatically that those TIRES things come out.
I think you taught us. Now you have a bigger one just before we go to commercial break. You have a bigger one?
Well, this is what we normally give our students, but frankly, Alfonso, your personality is so great, I thought I'd better give you a decent sized one.
Okay, this is the decent sized one. Trevor Wilkins, and I think you taught us how to sell ourselves to success today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And more with Success by Design show after this. Welcome back. And today we're talking about selling ourselves to success. And part of selling ourselves is public speaking. And to help us with that, we brought Steve Lowell. Thank you for coming on the program. Thank you for coming to the Rogers Studios here today.
Oh, happy to be here.
Now you're a speaking coach.
Yep.
So is there a difference between speaking and selling, or is it kind of like?
Well, there's a lot of overlap. So in business, you're always speaking, you're always selling, and you're always representing who you are and what you do. Difference is if you're doing it one-on-one or to a group or on a stage. But there's a lot of fundamental principles that are exactly the same. And really, when you're selling, you had a guest on here earlier, Trevor Wilkins, who's a selling guru, and he talked about really focusing in on the audience's needs and the buyer's needs. And it's the same thing when you're speaking. Either when you're doing a keynote address or an infomercial or a business presentation, it's really about the audience and what their needs are. So you're always selling something when you're out representing your business. Yeah.
So you are a mentor.
Yeah.
You're a speaker coach. What is that? What's exactly a speaker coach? You just, it's just like you sit with a whistle, or how does it work?
No, I don't say, although I hadn't thought of that. That's a pretty good idea.
It's like I get this. You're running beside, you're in the car. Hey, run more, or talk louder.
I could try that. No, what I do as a speaker coach, actually, I use the word mentor more than a coach, but what I do is I work with speakers at all levels. Most of them are professional speakers or aspiring speakers, and I help them put their message together and build their keynotes and put their stories in and really deliver their message so that it becomes live on the stage rather than just a lecture. I help them really put their personality into it and reach past the audience's intellect and into their imagination so that they can get their message in the world and have it affect change.
Now, is it important for someone in business or in a sales job or even at any point to be able to talk in public?
Oh yeah, it's the difference between running around trying to gather business and being recognized and having business come to you. And we go to these networking groups. You've been to lots, and we see it all the time. And people will go to these networking functions, and they almost wish people would come to them, and they're afraid to reach out. But the ones that get noticed are the ones that speak, either one-on-one, they're speaking about themselves, or they get the opportunity to take the stage and do the infomercial and the elevator pitch and all those things that we all do. But the ones that are willing to stand up and get noticed, and the ones that know how to do it well, are the ones that are remembered, and those are the ones that attract business more than having to go out and chase it.
So when someone's getting up, potentially speaking in public, how important is it to have a story? Because somebody might say, hey, I don't have a story. Like, am I not going to be successful, or does that even matter? Like, how important is a story?
Well, a story, it's really important. It doesn't necessarily mean you're not going to be successful, but the difference is this. When you're telling facts and figures, what you're doing is you're appealing to the person's intellect, which is fine, but that's what everybody does. When you engage story, you're reaching past their intellect into their imagination, and what you're doing is taking them on a journey, and you're engaging more of their senses. So you can engage their sense of sight and sound and smell and feel and emotions and all of that if you're very good at telling a story. So what I try and help people to do is, instead of talking about the history of your business and how you did last quarter and your plans for next year, talk about a customer, talk about a client who had a problem and how you solved the problem and how there was a successful story out of that problem.
You relate it to the audience. You relate your story to the audience.
Yeah, and you're bringing the audience on a journey. So I talk about you a lot because you and I have done a lot of business together. And so when I'm speaking about my business, I could stand on a stage and I could say, I'm a public speaking mentor and I help people with their speaking and presentation skills and their networking skills. Or I could say, let me tell you about Alfonso. And Alfonso came to me some time ago and had a really hard time speaking in public. So we helped him with his stage presence and his platform skills, and now he's a professional speaker. You see the difference there?
So people would say, "Oh, that was me."
That's me. Yeah. So when I'm speaking high level and I'm speaking, about something that is not real and something that's hypothetical, all I'm doing is engaging their brain, and I'm barely doing that. But when I talk about a person and a time and a place and a problem and a result and a process, now I'm taking them by the hand, walking them down that path, taking them on the same journey that you went in their minds, and now they're able to relate it to themselves or to somebody they know. And here's another really good example. There's a client of mine from a few years ago. His name is Brian. Brian is a tennis instructor. So he gets up in front of the group and he says, I'm Brian and I'm a tennis instructor. So I use this when I speak all the time. I'll have audience of hundreds or thousands and I'll say, You know, put up your hand if you or somebody you know is in the market for a tennis instructor. How many hands do you think go up?
0.
Yeah, 0. No hands ever go up because nobody's really in the market for a tennis instructor. So with Brian, what we did was we taught him how to engage story. And it doesn't have to be a specific story all the time, but here's what he says now. He says, you know, sometimes parents get so frustrated because their kids have so much energy, they don't know what to do with them. So what Brian says is, he says, I take kids of any age, I bring them on a tennis court, I absolutely exhaust them and hand them back to their parents. Yeah, then that's what happens. So when I'm speaking, I tell them that, and then I ask the audience again, put up your hand if somebody you know is in the market for a tennis instructor. How many hands do you think go up? Anybody who has kids, anybody who has nieces or nephews or brothers or sisters or neighbors, anybody who knows anybody with kids puts their hand up. So it's all in how you present the business, and when you encase it in a story, it changes everything. It changes
Absolutely.
how you're perceived. It changes how they think about you and your business, how they apply it in their lives. It changes everything.
Well, I've heard some speakers, and you're just in the crowd, and they just give you goosebumps. You just get the goosebumps, and you want to engage them further. You want to go back to their website. You want to see what else they've done, what books they have written. It's not even they're not even trying to sell you, but their story is so compelling that you got goosebumps. Now you're intrigued.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's because they've engaged more of your senses. I always tell speakers, you know, speaking is not about transferring information. And when I say speaking, you know, normally I'm talking about being on a stage, addressing an audience. But this is speaking as well. If you and I meet at a networking event or a social function and we're talking about business, my job is not to transfer information to you. I mean, that does happen, but my job is really to transfer feeling. So if I can get you to feel about my message the way I feel about my message, now we understand each other. And so if I'm excited about my business and I'm sold on my business and I know that my business and what I do is going to help you, I need to make you feel that more than know it. And this is where so many people struggle in their business. They think that networking is if I tell enough people about me, then things will change. You have to tell a lot of people for things to change. But if you can get people to feel something about you and your business, that's when things change. And that's all in how you present, on the stage or off the stage.
Now let's talk about the book a little bit. You wrote a book about, you know, going from stage fright, which a lot of people maybe watching this program are in right now. They're just in their closet. You know, they want to be public speakers. So you have a book that tells them kind of.
Yeah, I wrote this book, I guess about 2 years ago. It's called From Stage Fright to Spotlight. And the reason I wrote this book is because I run into so many people with that question. You know, they say, I'm mortified to get on a stage. You know, what can I do to get that, get rid of that fear? And so the book has 99 speakers' secrets. Breaking the rules and mastering the stage. That's what I call it. And the reason I call it that...
And why break the rules?
Well, here's why. Because people get so caught up in what they think are the rules to effective speaking, because they've been taught this by other speakers and by training companies and speaking clubs, and and they have these rules. Those rules were never really meant to be rules as much as they were meant to be techniques that you can use once you get comfortable on the stage. But what I see with so many people is they come in with these rules. I can't put my hands in my pocket, and I can't say ums, and I can't say ahs, and they encase themselves in these rules, and they create a box in which it's impossible for them to perform. So what I do with this book is I help them understand what rules they can break, what rules maybe shouldn't be broken, and how to do this all along the way so that people can just get on the stage and just be comfortable and forget about the rules, because it's not about the rules, and it's not about the words, and it's not about the performance and the ums and the ahs and all that. It's about getting what's in here to the audience. That's what it's about. And it doesn't matter it doesn't really matter how slick you are, how polished you are. That's important, and it comes later. And if you're going to speak at the professional level, then some of that's important, right? But at the business level, if you're an entrepreneur and you're trying to get your message out there and get people to know about you, the slickness on the stage is very secondary. It's about taking what's in your soul and sharing that with the audience.
And that's the other thing I wanted to ask, because you go to all these events and you watch all these speakers, and it just sounds sometimes like rehearsed, or it just doesn't sound right. Like, how important is it to be authentic?
Well, it's everything, and this happens a lot. And you hit the nail right on the head. It sounds rehearsed and it doesn't sound authentic, right? And what happens is people oftentimes will write and memorize what they're going to say. Whether it's a 45-minute keynote speech or even a 3-minute infomercial, they will write it and they'll memorize it and try and recite it. And the problem with that is that it's coming from their head. and they're spending their energy, their mental energy, trying to remember the words so that they come out in the proper order. And if you're speaking from your head, then you've forgotten all about your message. So what I counsel people to do is, it's okay to write it out. But you want to do more than memorize it. You want to internalize it. You want to read it over and over. You want to say it, and you want to put the notes away and have it part of part of who you are instead of part of what you do. And at that level, now it becomes authentic. Problem is, most people won't take that kind of time, because this isn't something that can happen for most people right away. It takes a lot of effort, a lot of practice, and a lot of time to get this right. So most people just say, you know what, I've written it, I'll just try and remember it, and then I'll wing it. And I'll get on the stage and wing it. And then they wing it, and then when they're finished, they say that didn't sound anything.
Have winged it.
Yeah, I shouldn't have winged it, right? But so winging it is not the same as doing it without notes. I never use notes when I speak because I know my stuff so well, because I've internalized it. And that's what I want to get my clients to do, internalize it, which is way more than memorizing it.
I think that's powerful. I mean, if anything someone could take from this interview, is just be authentic, just be yourself, and you will sell yourself by just being yourself.
Sure.
The other thing is, we want to teach people things on this show. We want to give them something they can take home.
Sure.
And this is your opportunity to give them 3 tips that, that they could take and run with it.
Sure. Okay. Well, I think tip number 1 would be something that we just talked about, and that is, don't spend so much energy on the memorization. Spend more energy on the internalization and focus on the message, so that when you get on the stage, you're speaking from here and not from here. That's tip number 1. Here's some little tips that people can do before they get on the stage to really help them get more comfortable. There's a molecule in your brain called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And what it does is it actually sort of lubricates your molecules, your neurons, and it helps you think better. So what I do is I take a walk, maybe 10, 15 minutes before I speak. Nothing to work up a sweat, but up and down the hall, maybe around the block kind of thing, because that is what engages those neurons. That's what releases that molecule. So when you take the stage, you feel better, you feel smarter, and you come out of the gate much more in your mojo than you would if you spent the last 15 minutes worrying about all the stress you're under. Okay? So that's tip number 2. And I think tip number 3 is, we talked about memorizing. There are some parts of the speaking that should be memorized. The first thing is the first line.
Okay, Steve, thank you very much for teaching us. And
you bet.
we'll see you again. See you guys next time with more Success by Design Show.